Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I am so excited and thrilled to have a special guest today. Today's topic is Mastering Dental Practice Protection, a conversation with Mark Spring from Treloar and Heisel. Hi, Mark. How are you doing today? Thank you for joining me.
I am doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So as people are joining us, let us know in the comments. We are going to be broadcasting this on YouTube, the Dental Startup Journey Show. And we're also hosting it or broadcasting it on our Facebook group, the Dental Startup Journey. Let us know in the comments if you are able to hear us okay. Give us a thumbs up and if the visuals are good as well. So I just for someone to let me know if we're good to go so we can, yes. So I have here someone saying, okay, awesome, perfect. So I am really excited for today's conversation because it is such an important topic to cover. And so, but before I do, I just want to make sure everyone understand who Mark is and why it is so important that you stick around till the end so that you can benefit from this conversation and beyond. So I am going to, so let me introduce my guest today. With over 16 years of experience in the financial advisory field, Mark Spring is a seasoned professional who oversees the New York and New England region for Treloar and Heisel. Mark dedicates much of his time working very closely with his practicing dentists while educating them in holistic financial planning, which is extremely important. He has been instrumental in helping hundreds of dental practices and medical professionals make the transition from new graduates to successful practice owners. So this is what really interests me the most. He's not just a financial expert. There's always a human behind all of the success, right? And all of the support that they bring to the field. He is also a fiduciary advisor holding a chartered financial consultant designation. And beyond, obviously, his professional life, he enjoys spending quality time with his wife and two daughters. And he's quite the grill master. Quote, just about anything on a grill. How are you doing, Mark, today?
I am doing very well. Thank you for that introduction. It makes me sound very official. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right into my questions for today. And just for those of you in the New York, New Jersey area, just so that you know, next week is finally the day that we're going to be hosting our tequila tasting tips and sips event at Mezcali in New York City. There is still some time. We still have some limited seats available for registration. It's a free event. Mark is going to be there to also shed all of his knowledge and answer specific questions. If you have any questions as we go through this topic, let us know in the comments as well. But I definitely encourage you to make sure that if you are in the New York, New Jersey area, you do not miss this event because Mark is going to be there. So I wanted to just kick off our conversation, Mark, with asking you, tapping into your wealth of knowledge, right? And discussing this so important topic about practice protection. So we're going to basically explore different strategies that you recommend and some myths and things to help dentists be protected. So my first question, right, that I want us to cover is, as dentists are basically evolving in their careers, they start off and then they go through different milestones as professionals. What are some of the recommendations and things that they should be looking at in terms of professional liability? And if you can tell us a little bit more, like on the basic level, what's the difference between one and the other? What are some of the, like, if you can outline for us the types of coverage, depending on whatever stage a dentist is in, from launching and getting their license to being established and practicing and growing their practices?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for the audience today, thank you guys for tuning in. If any other specific questions pop up in your mind or you want to put anything into the chat, happy to field those as well. So Maritza, as far as the process of the insurance planning, or really more the liability side of it, it really starts as early as your dental school days or even your residency days, as far as putting the right pieces into place early on. And then, as you mentioned, you'll kind of transition out into private practice where you might start off as an associate. And then usually around a couple of years is when we see people kind of start to get that itch where they maybe want to go do a startup or buy an established practice, or really try to find that long-term opportunity after they've kind of gotten their feet wet in private practice, maybe bounced around a little bit. So as far as your baseline stuff, I mean, really across the board for any dentist, the first thing we'd say is to get a disability insurance policy. I'm sure all of you guys have had talks about this back in school or residency, but that's really the kind of the one thing all of you are going to have to get. So start off with that. They're very, very low cost when you're younger and you're early on in your career. It doesn't take a whole lot to get that secured. There's a couple baseline things you want to make sure you have. Make sure the policies are all individualized so you kind of control it. It can't be changed by the insurance company. It can't be canceled later. You also want it to be occupation specific. So for a GP or a specialist or whatever it is you're doing on a day-to-day basis with your patient care, make sure your policy is specific to that occupation. Also, make sure you've got the ability to increase your plan regardless of any changes to your health. So those are really the important ones. What you see is a lot of younger dentists who think they're bulletproof. You know, we've all been in our mid-20s and early 30s where nothing can hurt us. But it is really unfortunate to see situations where somebody has some kind of medical diagnosis, some kind of treatment they got during school or residency for even as simple as seeing a chiropractor or seeing a mental health professional, which can really affect your ability to get these insurance plans later. So while you're young and you have a pretty clean bill of health, it's important to kind of take care of those things as early as possible. And I mean, really a $50 a month policy can put you in a good position to build on all that once you graduate and get out into practice. But even before you go from school to residency or residency out into your associate job, or if you're going to work at a hospital or a health center or whatever it may be, make sure you get that one number one. The other kind of must have, and this would just be kind of situational, if you have children, if you are kind of the lion's share of the income for your spouse, if you'll be taking care of older parents, probably want to get a life insurance policy as well. Same thing, if you do it the right way while you're young and healthy, they're not expensive. You're not going to be spending a ton of money on these plans. But those are kind of your baseline things that I would say address really as soon as possible. If you're still in dental school or in residency, now's the time to do it. Try not to wait until you go out into practice because it's typically more expensive that way. Now, once you've left residency, now we're going to be getting into more of the business side of things, where pretty much all of you will have to get some type of malpractice insurance if you're going to go into private practice. Now, if you go work at a DSO or a health center, hospital, faculty at a dental school, things like that, they're going to provide some of that stuff for you. But if you're going out as an associate or really anything in the private practice field, you're probably going to have to get your own. That one you really can't set up until you have a location to insure. So you actually need an office and a start date. But once you have that job lined up, then you get your malpractice insurance, where pretty much it's a legal requirement. Nobody's going to hire you without it. Plus, in today's society, dental lawsuits are becoming more frequent, more severe. It's a good idea to have that coverage and have it really adequate for where you are. You know, if you're working in New York City or New Jersey, it's a more expensive area to practice. Lawsuits are more prevalent. They're also a little bit bigger compared to, you know, your average lawsuit from Idaho or Nebraska or something like that. So make sure your coverage is appropriate based on where you're working. Obviously, bigger cities are a little bit more expensive to work in. They're more litigious. You're probably going to wind up paying a higher price for your policy in those areas. But it's because you're taking on that extra risk of being a dentist in New York or Boston or DC or any of the big metropolitan areas where you're probably going to have a higher price.
It's funny you mentioned something earlier, going back to the disability insurance, because I can relate to that when I was just getting started. And I see this, like when you're in your 20s, how you're saying that a policy when you start early on could be $50 a month. And we all take so many risks. We take on loans, we take, you know, dental student debt and credit card debt. Mm-hmm. And we just do not, as, you know, and again, you know, this is me 20 years ago, but I see this all the time where we sort of like kick the can a little bit further up and further up. And by the time you realize the importance and the benefits of just having that, it's already getting more and more expensive. And to your point, I just want all of our young listeners out there, $50 a month, or even if it's $100 a month, this is protection. And this is the entire topic for today's conversation, is, demystifying some of those, misconceptions that we have about protection, and thinking that I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't need this right now. But think about how else are you spending your money that could potentially put you at a disadvantage financially later on, or in terms of your protection. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I thought that like I personally, in terms of disability insurance for a young dentist, if you will, I wouldn't know, like the premiums, if you will, but you mentioned that at least on average, depending on their age, could start off at that price point. And I think that is like less than they spend when they have a drink and a meal with a friend, and they do this
especially in New York. Yeah,
exactly. Well, yeah, you're right. New York.
That's one night where you just have a sandwich before you go out and meet your friends.
So I just wanted to throw that out there so that you guys can start to really understand the importance, and so that you're not afraid, because I think that a lot of people may have this preconceived notion like, oh, I must be getting old. Why are you considering so this is all important stuff to do, but you may continue now. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. And please feel free to chime in. I think this is probably better conversational than me just kind of listing off insurance plans. But as you're kind of covering the professional liability on the malpractice side, make sure you're also aware that you guys also have a lot of personal liability. Dentistry as a whole is an industry that can be targeted, right? People will see you in your scrubs and in your nice car and drive into your nice house, and you want to make sure you've got appropriate umbrella coverage too. That's something you usually kind of tack on to your home and auto insurance. Just make sure you've got appropriate coverage for that too, because it's entirely separate. You guys can obviously be sued for malpractice if you don't do the right things from a patient care perspective.
Okay.
But you also have liability on the personal side. If it's even as something as simple as a fender bender, or you have a party at your house and invite a bunch of people from the neighborhood over, and somebody slips on the sidewalk trying to walk into your front door. These are all things that can lead to lawsuits. And I've seen a lot of off the wall scenarios for clients of ours. So just kind of make sure you've got that stuff covered from a personal side. I'm
a student here and I'm taking notes. So we have our professional malpractice, which basically covers you from, not that you're clinically not doing a good job, but let's say a crown fails or something, and the patient retaliates against that, or there is a claim against you professionally based on the dental services that you provide. This is what's mandatory, because I work a lot with, negotiating with PPOs, and the credentialing process is part of almost like part of your licensing and credentialing, or credentials that you have to maintain in order for you to be in the profession, right? But what you're talking about here is that there are separate layers or different types of coverage in addition to the malpractice insurance that they should consider, such as personal liability and then the one basically like general liability for their businesses. So explain that to me a little bit more.
Exactly. So from a business liability perspective, when you're an associate, so you don't have any ownership, you're just a W-2 employee, you show up, you work, you leave. All the liability really is going to be on your employer. You'll have to have your own malpractice insurance, but as far as any business liability, that's going to be on the employer, right? Now, if you decide to go out on your own, open up your own practice, or if you're working as an independent contractor, then you're going to want to have your own business liability coverage. And these plans are, again, not super expensive. Don't feel like you're going to be spending a fortune on them. But basically, they'll cover you for any legal risk outside of malpractice. And this could be being sued by a patient for discrimination, or being sued by a dental assistant for harassment or a hostile work environment, or anything like that. There's a lot of different things out there that we can get sued for these days. There's pretty much a policy that will cover everything. You have coverage for data breach. If somebody ransomwares any of your software, or they shut down all your system and make you pay them $50,000 before they'll let you get back into your patient files or something. Employer practice liability covers any lawsuits from your employees. If it's, wage theft or some type of hostile work environment, age discrimination, wrongful termination, any of those things. So there's a litany of things you need to protect yourself from. Usually these things are all kind of bundled into a package. So don't feel like you need to individually write down, like, I need coverage for all these different things. It's usually bundled all into one big policy for a business owner. That typically an agent will talk you through all these things. So kind of like you're going down the buffet line, do you want to add this? Do you want to add that? Here's what it's going to cost. Here's what it does. Is that important to you?
Awesome. Okay. And you were touching also on the personal liability, which is like something more like something that happens at your home. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. Yeah. So those policies would be specific to you individually as opposed to you, the practice owner. Got
it. Okay, perfect. So here are my second question is some misconceptions about dental. And I talk dental because I do deal with dental insurances, and we should emphasize that we're talking about other types of insurance, because insurance is such a broad, topic or name. I talk insurance, dental insurance all the time, but we're talking about protection insurance. So my second question is, there are a lot of misconceptions about, being covered. And I think I touched a little bit about the age groups and things like that, about disability insurance. I personally experienced that when I was younger, and I wish I had the disability insurance at an earlier age in my career. But can you share some common myths or misconceptions that dentists, in your experience, bring about or they might have when it comes to liability and or malpractice insurance, and how can basically dispelling these myths can lead to basically help them better protect themselves and their practices?
Absolutely. So I think the big myth I see, or I guess the one point I always try to make, everybody kind of thinks of insurance as this necessary evil that you kind of have to have professionally and personally. And to some extent that is true. Like, bank's not going to loan you money without certain insurance policies. A landlord won't bring you on as a tenant without certain insurance policies. But there's kind of a misconception that it's kind of a sunk cost. And to be very clear, my firm, Treloar and Heisel, we insure over 20,000 dentists nationally. We handle more claims for dentists in a month than most insurance agents probably handle their whole career. These companies pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in claims for disability, for property damage, for loss of use, for malpractice cover. It's staggering how much money the benefits get paid to policyholders on an annual basis from all of these companies. So don't feel like you're paying into something just because you have to. This really is a safety net that I have seen in action multiple times to get people through what are really some of the worst times of their life, right? If you've lost a loved one, if you've become disabled and can no longer go treat patients or run your business, if a tornado knocks your office down and it's going to be 6 months for rebuild, those things can be absolutely devastating to you personally, or to your business, or to your family. So please don't feel like it's this sunk cost where you're actually not going to get anything back if you need it. These businesses, these insurance companies are all dedicated to honoring their commitment and paying their claims. So that'd be the first misconception I can tell you. The second one, and this one is going to be, obviously there's a bias in all this. Everybody's going to think you should work with them instead of somebody else, but make sure you're not just looking specifically at price. It's very easy to see two different quotes from two different insurance professionals. Maybe one's a little bit lower cost than the other one. It's very easy to change how these quotes are structured or how these policies are structured to shave off a couple of bucks, but it may be something that's detrimental to you from a benefit side. What I tell a lot of my clients when it comes to setting up insurance for their business or their practice, you could be driving a Ferrari, but if you have it insured like a Honda Civic, you might think you have a good deal on your insurance, but all you really have is a bad insurance policy. So make sure you're not just comparing that bottom line number. Hopefully talk to a professional who can kind of go through it with you and say, here's how it works and why it costs this amount. But just comparing that bottom line price is something that can be a little bit dangerous. It can kind of put you in a bad spot from a coverage perspective, even if you are saving a couple bucks on that premium. And then the other misconception I see, and this is not only on the personal insurance side, like your disability or your life insurance, but also on the business insurance side. Be honest with your agent, be honest with the insurance company. Don't try to pull punches or hide stuff. They're going to find it. Especially as far as the insurance plans go. If somebody tells you not to mention something in your medical history, if somebody tells you to kind of fudge the numbers on your office as far as how old the building is or square footage or stuff like that, those are not beneficial to you at all as the policyholder. All you're doing is kind of setting yourself up for a much, much harder time getting a claim paid, or even, God forbid, possibly avoiding your whole policy if you're leaving off substantial information. So talk to your agent. Your agent is your advocate. They should be able to explain to you what to expect based on any scenario. Don't withhold information from us or from the insurance company, because they have very, very good fraud prevention departments. They have tons of different ways that they can dig out this information.
A lot of resources, so, right?
Don't pull any punches on that. Make sure you're always upfront with your provider. And sometimes it's not as bad, or most of the time it's not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Got it. So just to sort of rephrase that, or just to understand, one of the misconceptions that you see, or at least two of them that I took down, is a lot of doctors think that a lower premium means that it's a better policy, and they try to just follow the numbers or their, cost of getting the policy. And so that is a myth that they are getting a better policy. They should not pay attention to the number, because there is going to be, the trade-off is most likely going to be, if you have a lower premium policy, that means that the benefit level is going to be the trade-off, and it could basically harm you later on, depending on any,
I guess to clarify, and don't get me wrong, like price is certainly a factor in any buying decision, whether it's an insurance policy or a car or, a gallon of milk. But just make sure that that's not the only thing you're considering. Quote A and quote B might be off by, 25 or 30%. There's probably a reason for that. So you want to make sure why there's a price difference.
Exactly. And what is the difference. So do not look at the number alone. Just look at exactly what you need and why you need it, why it will be beneficial for you before you make that decision based on pricing alone. The second one is to be honest with your agent, because again, thinking that if I hide something about my health or something that might have happened as I was working as an associate, that it's going to help me lower the premium or something like that. What you're saying is that there are ways for you to just have the resources to look into some of the information. So not to withhold honest information that is going to help them position their policies in a way that is going to protect them, because in the future, should an event come by that you need to tap into your policy, it's going to be difficult for you because you withheld information prior to that. Is that what I get that right?
Just don't pull any punches on stuff. You see that a lot with students and residents where an attending told them, or they read it on a blog somewhere, and it's like, don't mention that you saw a mental health professional in dental school, or don't mention that you go to the chiropractor, and things like that, where your med history is your med history. We're not going to be able to unring the bell.
So that leads me to this question, a follow-up question to that question, because I can understand if there is not a proper diagnosis. Let's just say someone, hypothetically speaking, will use this example of the the clinician telling the student, don't tell him that you go to the chiropractor. Is there a reason why, will it affect them with their getting their policies or the premiums and things like that, if they do have a short-term situation?
So those are all going to be kind of case by case. It's hard to give a blanket statement on that one. But as far as the advice I would give is just to talk through it with your agent. They should be able to tell you with pretty reasonable accuracy what to expect. And most of the time, if it's a short-term thing, it's not something that is going to permanently affect you. It might just be a short-term, exclusion or something carved out of that policy for 2 or 3 years, maybe. But the moral of the story would be, try not to hide anything, because if the insurance company has to come back and question you about it later, it already kind of puts you in a negative light to the underwriter there. They kind of have the what if rule or what else rule. What else are they hiding from me? So be upfront with your agent and your insurer. Try not to pull any punches when it comes to your application details and personal details and things like that.
To wrap up on the myths, right? Is it a fair statement to say that another myth could be that the agents are out to get you rather than being an extension of your team and support you? And that is why they seek the advice of other people that are not necessarily the people that they're purchasing the policies from?
So your agent kind of has two roles, right? We have to advise our clients ethically, right? We have to give you the right advice on how to protect yourself. We also have to do what's right by the insurance company. Like, we can't defraud them either. You'll definitely have people say, like, can we just not mention that? Like, of course not. Like, I do business with this insurance company as well. So we have to be honest with our clients and do what's best for them. But also, we have an agreement with the insurance companies that we broker with that we're going to be honest and upfront with them as well. So your agent, again, should be able to talk through it with you and say, here's what you should expect. And then you can kind of make your decision from there versus trying to, hide stuff and hopefully they don't find it, because they will.
Okay, so my last question, because I want to be respectful of your time. What are some best practices that dentists should follow when it comes to managing and optimizing their liability and malpractice coverage? Do you have any specific strategies or tips that you can offer to our audience so that they can ensure the security of their dental practice is better?
Sure, absolutely. So a couple of tips, I would say. Number one, when it comes to picking who you want to work with, there's thousands upon thousands of insurance agents and financial advisors out there. All of you have probably met one, know one. They might be your cousin or your uncle or your buddy from high school or whatever. Try to stick with people who are specific to your industry.
I see.
Dentistry is big enough that there are definitely niche advisors for practice startups, for lending, for real estate. All these things we'll be kind of talking about next week at our event. But stick with someone who's specific to dentistry and dental medical. There's little nuances and caveats that we know that your average run-of-the-mill advisor may not. So that's probably the main one, is sticking with people who are independent, so they work with multiple companies. They can show you different options on different types of insurance. And then again, they're specific to your industry and they've been doing it for a while in a niche market. The other one I would recommend you do is make sure you're reviewing all this stuff pretty regularly. We like to do reviews at least once a year. But you also run into clients who, you go 4 or 5 years without them agreeing to sit down with you and review all their policies, and stuff can get missed. It's hard to make sure your policies are at the appropriate amount. If you've moved, or if you have to update address or equipment you've added to your office, little things like that. So make sure that you're reviewing this stuff on a pretty regular basis, hopefully at least once a year with your team, just to make sure everything is where it needs to be.
This has been so insightful, and I wish we had more time. But to that extent, tell me a little bit more, Mark, about what some of the questions and topics that you're going to be covering during our tequila tasting tips and sips event next week in New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are focusing everything next week for people who want to start up a practice, right? So the insurance plans we'll be talking about will be mostly what you'll need to get through that closing process to get a lease, get a landlord under some kind of space for you to build out, what to do as far as your early stages as you're transitioning from that startup to actually opening doors to actually seeing patients, what insurance plans you need to have in place and when, so that you have a good timeline as far as how long it's going to take to get things done. Because as Marie says, I'm sure you can back it up. Sometimes you get down to the wire with these closings and they're like, we need all these things in the next week. And some of these plans, you just can't get together that fast, right? So we will kind of have a good timeline set up for when you want to have what thing in place, roughly what those things are going to be costing you or the process to get them, but really focus it more on the new professional who's going to be starting up and kind of transitioning from that associateship into practice ownership.
I'm really excited. Another thing, just, for those of you that are going to be in the area that I think we did not have time to touch base on is partnerships, and how do you manage getting protection for your practice when you are going into a practice as a partnership. And if you're purchasing real estate, what does that look like? What kind of coverages do you need to do, and things of that nature? So just to wrap up, I think that, today's conversation, I want to say, has been very insightful. I learned a lot. I took on a lot of notes. For those of you listening or watching live, thank you so much for being with us. And for those of you, again, I cannot stress it enough, that are going to be in the New York, New Jersey area, tequila tasting and tips and sips startup venture. It's next week, Wednesday the 8th at 6:30 at Mezcali. We're going to make sure that we put the link so that you can, if there's still time and room for you to register, so you can take advantage of that. Mark is going to be there. He's going to be sharing a lot more information with us, specific questions to you. So I'm really excited and looking forward to that event. And Mark, did you have anything else to add or say before we wrap up? It's been such an amazing experience talking to you today and learning from you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you again. Hopefully we'll see some of you guys next week. Come prepared to ask questions. We'd love it to be interactive, and making sure you guys are having all your bases covered if you want to take that next step.
All your ducks in a row. That's what I always say to my clients. Thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely.
I look forward to seeing you in another episode. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Marisa.